From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Obviously, they're an independent, they're a sovereign country. They'll ultimately make decisions based on what they think is in their national security interests. But I don't believe they made that decision at this time.
Could Israel launch an attack on Iran before the U.S. election in November? As the drums of war beat louder in Israel, we'll speak with Israeli journalist Gideon Levy in Tel Aviv, Phyllis Bennis of the Institute for Policy Studies, and Trita Parsi of the National Iranian-American Council. This comes as harsh U.S. sanctions on Iran are hindering international donations for victims of this weekend's double earthquakes. Then we look at Vice Presidential candidate Paul Ryan's budget proposal to partially privatize Social Security and dismantle Medicare and Medicaid.
We're at a moment where if government's growth is left unchecked and unchallenged, America's best century will be considered our past century. This is a future in which we will transform our social safety net into a hammock, which lulls able-bodied people into lives of complacency and dependency.
As Social Security turns 77, will the program last another 77 years? We'll speak with Heather McGee of Demos and Eric Larson, author of The People's Pension, the struggle to defend Social Security since Reagan.
What's disturbing about the privatization proposals that are coming up is that they treat it as something akin to a savings account or an investment account rather than as a sort of a social compact.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Rebel fighters have claimed responsibility for a major bombing in the Syrian capital of Damascus. A number of explosions were reported earlier today in an area housing military facilities, including the Syrian regime's Central Security Command. The blasts apparently occurred near the hotel for UN observers, but Syria's opposition says it only intended to strike regime targets. The Syrian government says just 3 people were wounded, but rebels claim the toll could be far higher. The attack came amidst a visit to Syria by the United Nations humanitarian chief, Valerie Amos.
Clearly, the situation has got worse since I was here in March. We will, through our partners, the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, who, as you know, have been doing an extremely good job trying to make sure that people who need help get help. We will continue to support them, but also work to scale up our own efforts.
At least 43 people were killed in Afghanistan Tuesday in a series of bombings and shootings. The worst attack came in the southwestern province of Nimruz, where a suicide bomber killed 29 people and wounded 57 others. It was the deadliest attack for Afghan civilians this year. Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa says he has still not reached a decision about whether to grant asylum to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. In a tweet, Correa said, quote, "Rumor of asylum to Assange is false. There's still no decision in this respect." He was responding to a report in the Guardian newspaper, quoting an unnamed official who said the decision had already been made. The reporter, Irene Caselli, has stood by her story, which Assange says that Assange was offered asylum in Ecuador months ago before he entered the Ecuadorian embassy in London in June. Assange is seeking to avoid extradition to Sweden and ultimately, he says, to the United States. President Correa has previously said he would make the decision sometime. It's expected this week. A newly published court filing details the harsh treatment faced by alleged U.S. Army whistleblower Bradley Manning while he was imprisoned at the U.S. Marine Corps base in Quantico in 2010 and in 2011. Manning's accused of leaking a trove of documents to the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, but his defense team argued in a motion late last month that all charges should be dismissed due to Manning's, quote, unlawful pretrial punishment. According to the filing, Bradley Manning was kept in a 6-by-8-foot cell for 23 to 24 hours a day, banned from lying down or even leaning against the wall when he wasn't sleeping. The filing says Manning was woken up at 5 in the morning and forced to remain awake until 10 p.m. Lawyers accuse the officers at Quantico of using Manning's mental health as an excuse to keep him in the functional equivalent of solitary confinement, despite multiple objections by psychiatrists. Guards reportedly checked on Manning every 5 minutes and woke him up at night if they couldn't see him clearly. He was required to eat all his meals alone with only a spoon, made to sleep with a tear-proof security blanket that irritated his skin, and forced to request toilet paper every time he wanted to use the bathroom. In addition, the complaint alleges Manning was not allowed to have any personal items or to exercise in his cell. If Manning's treatment is found by a judge to have been illegal, he could theoretically receive credit on the amount of time served in custody or even see his charges dismissed outright. A new federal immigration policy takes effect today that could stop the deportation of as many as 1.3 million undocumented immigrants who were brought to the United States as children. Beginning today, students under the age of 30 may be eligible for a 2-year reprieve from deportation if they meet certain conditions. Speaking on Democracy Now! Last week, Tom Shea of the New York Immigration Coalition explained what the Obama administration's new deferred action for childhood arrivals will mean for undocumented youth.
Deferred action for childhood arrivals is not a pathway to legalization, a pathway to the green card, or a pathway to citizenship. Unlike the DREAM Act, if Congress had passed the DREAM Act, it would be a pathway to people getting their green card. And deferred action for childhood arrivals is just really a determination by the immigration authorities that we're not going to deport you. We could deport you from the United States, but we are not going to start deportation proceedings against you. Or if you're in deportation proceedings, we're going to stop the deportation proceedings against you. Or if you have
how long?
For 2 years, and during that 2-year period, you could get a work permit.
The makeup of a number of congressional races this November was decided Tuesday with primaries in 4 states. In Wisconsin, former Governor Tommy Thompson clinched the Republican nomination to square off against Democratic Congressmember Tammy Baldwin in the race to fill the seat of outgoing Democratic Senator Herb Kohl. In Florida, the Tea Party challenger, Ted Yoho, pulled off a major upset by defeating 12-term incumbent Congressmember Cliff Stearns in the Republican primary. Stearns is known for leading the Republican efforts to investigate Planned Parenthood in Congress over the past year. He's refusing to concede the race. In Connecticut, former World Wrestling Entertainment executive Linda McMahon defeated the more moderate Congressmember Christopher Shays for the Republican nomination in the primary to replace outgoing Senator Joe Lieberman. McMahon, a Tea Party favorite, will square off against Democratic Congressmember Chris Murphy. On the campaign trail, President Obama and Republican challenger Mitt Romney traded barbs over energy policy Tuesday during separate appearances. Speaking during a second consecutive day of campaigning in Iowa, President Obama said Romney has failed to support renewable power sources such as wind.
He said that new sources of energy like wind are imaginary. His running mate calls them a fad. During a speech a few months ago, Governor Romney even explained his energy policy this way. I'm quoting here, "You can't drive a car with a windmill on it." That's what he said about wind power. You can't drive a car with a windmill on it. Now, I don't know if he's actually tried that. I know he's had other things on his car. But if he wants to learn something about wind, all he's got to do is pay attention to what you've been doing here in Iowa.
Romney, meanwhile, stumped in Ohio, where he said President Obama's energy policy has fallen short in its support for coal mining.
One promise he kept was with regard to energy. He said if he's elected president and his policies get put in place, the cost of energy would skyrocket. That's what he's kept. He also said you can go out and build a new coal plant if you want, but if you do, you'll go bankrupt. That's another promise he's intent on keeping. His vice president said coal is more dangerous than terrorists. Can you imagine that? This tells you precisely what he actually feels and what he's done.
The British bank Standard Chartered has agreed to pay a $340 million fine to New York's financial regulator to settle allegations of hiding hundreds of billions of dollars in transactions linked to Iran. New York's Department of Financial Services says Standard Chartered Bank schemed with Iran's government, despite U.S. economic sanctions, to hide tens of thousands of transactions over nearly a decade, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in fees. The bank's in talks to pay similar fines in other states. A federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit accusing the FBI of civil liberties violations by using an informant to spy on several California mosques. Former informant Craig Monte has acknowledged posing as a Muslim convert to collect the personal information of mosque members and even record their meetings and conversations. But on Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Cormac Carney threw out the case, saying it would risk disclosing government secrets. Two groups representing the plaintiffs, the American Civil Liberties Union and the Council on American Islamic Relations, say they plan to appeal. The environmental group Greenpeace is ramping up efforts to oppose oil drilling in the Arctic. The Russian state-owned energy giant Gazprom is set to become the first company to produce Arctic oil through drilling operations in the Pechora Sea. On Tuesday, Greenpeace warned an oil spill there could cause irreparable damage, threatening some 50,000 square miles. Greenpeace Executive Director Kumi Naidu said the group plans to continue to challenge drilling platforms in the Arctic.
Our political leaders are in denial about how serious the problem is. I mean, right now, if we look at the actual impacts that are happening, the U.S. in July, hottest ever recorded temperature from the time temperatures have actually capped, 15 states with drought. Given the urgency, we do not make any apologies for the need for peaceful, non-violent direct action that actually gets our political leaders and our business leaders to recognize that time is fast running out and that we have to act with greater urgency and with a greater level of ambition if we are to avert catastrophic climate change.
And a Brazilian court has again halted construction on a major hydroelectric dam in the Amazon rainforest. The $11 billion Belo Monte Dam project was approved for construction over the objections of indigenous communities who've brought numerous challenges, citing environmental concerns and the fear of mass displacement. On Tuesday, a federal judge in Brazil ruled the government must consult with indigenous groups before the project can resume. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Narmeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.